All right. So we have the chat feature on. Um, just want to give everybody an opportunity to ask any questions. Just thought it might be easier this way so that we don't have all the microphones going on at the same time and we can get through every question in an orderly fashion. So if you want, just go onto your chat feature that you have there on Zoom, and just feel free to ask Dr. Walsh a question. He's given some time to be able to do this. So we'll go with the first question there. If you can have an addiction to anything that is capable of changing your mood, could you possibly be addicted to food as well?
Absolutely. The difference of food is that it doesn't it isn't supposed to be able to create the chemical addiction component that like cocaine would. Cocaine is very purified. Heroin is very purified. These come from natural plants. Cocaine and heroin coming from like the poppy plant. Um, so food isn't supposed to. What's changed and to cause food to have the power to be so addicting is that it's been really designed now. And the junk foods that we eat, I don't know if you guys have Doritos over there, Snickers bars and those types of things. These foods are designed to be addictive because it makes more money. So when you combine fat, salt, and sugar together, and you make things very crunchy, you can actually trick the brain. There's a great book called Salt, Sugar, and Fat by Michael. Not Michael. Michael's his last name. Not Michael Pollard. I'll remember in a second. But he actually goes through how the food industry designs these foods to be addicting. So you don't get addicted to apples. You don't really get addicted to mangoes as much as I love mangoes. You eat a mango or two and you probably stop. But if someone sits a bowl of potato chips in front of you, people can eat potato chips all day. And that's because there is an addictive element to it. So you absolutely can become addicted to food, but it's different in a sense that it's not as pure in its ability to release dopamine like the drugs are, but it's similar.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. And a really good question that's just come through as well. Another question that's just come through is, I guess, what is the best thing we can do, or the best way in which we can help someone who's going through an addiction at the moment?
Like I said, once someone is addicted, you have to be careful not to judge them, because it's easy to judge them and think that they're morally weak. But in fact, a lot of times, because they're physiologically dependent on these substances and go through harsh withdrawals, it's really important to understand that they may be more ashamed, more upset than you can imagine. So what you have to do is first of all, pray. I've learned that prayer is a powerful tool when you're trying to assist someone else, because sometimes the other person doesn't know to pray for themselves, and our prayers give God, quote unquote, permission to act in their lives when they're not asking for his help. We, as the scripture says, we get to stand in the gap for those individuals. So the first thing you do is you pray. The second thing you do is you try and be supportive, but you have to be careful. I mean, I've been around people who are addicted and they're not at a stage in the recovery cycle where they're ready to really be. So you can't give them money and give them stuff because you might really help feed the addiction. So you got to find creative ways. Sometimes there's an intervention that needs to be done, and the family sit down together and you say, listen, this isn't good. You need help. And the person can go into rehab. So you got to be supportive from that perspective. But I think letting the person know that when they're ready for help, you're ready to help them, that they don't have to go through recovery by themselves is probably the best thing you can do. And then getting them into a good, hopefully Christ-centered recovery program. Neil Nedley up at Weimar in California does some great mental health work from an Adventist health message standpoint. So something similar to that would really be good. But any Christian counselor, honestly, would be better than not having a Christian counselor.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. We've just had a couple more great questions come through. One is, what doctors prescribe with regards to drugs or medications should they be accepted by Christians or people in general?
Well, there's some medications that are necessary for two reasons, for a couple of reasons. One of them is when you look at like this coronavirus, what doctor is prescribing some drugs should be accepted by Christians or people in general? It depends on the situation. If you get into a terrible car accident, and you need, you have damage to your heart, and you need epinephrine to keep your heart pumping while they work on you, then that's a drug that could actually save your life in a traumatic situation. Or if you need surgery to clamp off a vessel, there are medications that they give to allow you to go under the knife, anesthesia and so forth. I would say that most of what we prescribe in Western medicine, if people followed the Adventist health diet, they wouldn't need those medications. And one of the challenges as a Christian doctor that you face is people, they want to drink alcohol, they want to smoke, they want to do all these things. And they're literally, they would prefer to take drugs to try and manage that and to change their lifestyle. So I'm not a huge fan of prescription drugs in general, but at the same time, I understand that for a lot of people, at least in the States, I don't know what it's like in Australia, they would rather take the drugs and keep living a bad lifestyle. And without changing the lifestyle, it doesn't matter, prescribe or not prescribe, they're shortening their lives.
Thanks for sharing that. Next question is, how bad is coffee?
Well, coffee can be bad. Caffeine is also addicting. That's a good question. And so coffee also affects the dopaminergic pathways I spoke about. So dopamine is impacted. It's also a stimulant. And one of the things that coffee does that's really bad is so many things. One of them, it makes you kind of insulin resistant, so it can make your blood sugars go up. But it actually also affects your sleep, makes it harder for people to fall asleep. And it can also cause you to not go into the deeper stages of sleep. If you don't sleep well, it's harder to control your appetite for food and other things. We know that during sleep is when that's buoyed up. And also deep sleep is also important for a proper functioning immune system. Coffee messes with all of that. It makes you feel really good and really awake and alive. And so, for that reason, caffeine is really dangerous because it makes people feel good. It's very accepted. There's a lot of studies that say caffeine is good for you. But the reason that happens is because the coffee bean is full of antioxidants. If you eat a typical Western diet, a standard American diet, there's so few antioxidants that when you study people who drink coffee, they actually look healthier because they at least have some more extra antioxidants. But if you're eating a whole food plant-based diet, the caffeine will not have that effect on you because you'll be getting your antioxidants from food like you're supposed to, and you won't need its stimulant effect.
I just got another question here that I want to, I think I'll just make sure I'm reading it right. Is there a possibility to change your teaching, that God can change your soul for the teaching, that you need to submit your soul for God to change it for better? I don't know if that might be
that question because I think it's funny because I think they're saying the same thing twice in a sense. So I believe that you must submit your soul to God to be changed, but I do believe that ultimately the Bible says it is God who wills in us to do His good pleasure. So God is the one who's doing the work at the end of the day. But again, it goes back to the frontal lobe, as I said in the talk. The frontal lobe is where you make the decision. The prodigal son, when he was in the pig pen, the Bible says he came to himself. He made a decision to go to his father. He couldn't clean himself up. He couldn't do anything else. All he could do was make that decision and begin to move towards the father. The father comes running towards him. And the father is the one who changes him. So, the wording on that one, I'm not quite clear about. I like the question, but I do believe that at the end of the day, the choice, like I talked about in the frontal lobe, is the choice to submit. It's the choice to choose God. This is why we believe in righteousness by faith, because we have to choose to believe. So
I think that the question was just getting to the point where ultimately at the end of the day, we are dealing with a submission, right, on our part, that God.
Yeah, that's that choice. Yeah, that's come let us reason together. We have to choose God. That's the one thing He can't do for us.
I got another question here saying, how do we break through to friends or people in our lives that might be in a situation where they think that their addiction that is either normal, or they might not even realize that they have an addiction? And I guess follow up that question with, for example, can somebody be addicted to alcohol, for example, drinking only one cup a day of wine, and not go out and get drunk every day? Could that also be counted as an addiction? So I think the questions coming through is, how do we get through to people that have addictions that either they think it's normal, or they might not be aware of the fact that they actually have an addiction?
Well, if they're Christian, they're like, again, you can use the Bible. Adventists, you can use the spirit of prophecy, but for everybody else, you can use science. The studies are overwhelming. Even a glass of alcohol a day, like I said, increases the risk of breast cancer in women. And most of the beneficial effects that they say they attribute to like wine actually is more the resveratrol in the skin of the grape that actually is what's healthy. It's not the alcohol itself. You can get the same effect from drinking grape juice or eating grapes. So you have to show people that in fact there is a risk to drink to alcohol. And so it's not even one drink a day, because the other thing that happens is if someone who's drinking one drink a day loses their job or their marriage goes south, what we find sometimes is that those individuals now that were drinking one drink a day, because they kept that pathway, that mood change every night, that glass of wine changed their mood. When they really get into trouble, they now want 2, 3, 4, 5 glasses. And so the drinking can go up pretty precipitously. It's one of the big discussions here in the United States around this lockdown, is that with every percentage point of unemployment that goes up, they say, President Trump has said it, and there's even been some other experts that have come out and said, no, it's true. Suicides go up and drug addiction, drug overdoses go up. So people sometimes that function well in good weather, when things go bad, they turn to some of these things and drink even more. So you've got to show people the science on some of it. If you can't use spiritual things, that these things actually do come with a risk, and then they have to choose. Some people are going to choose to leave things normal and standard that even when they know it's not, and that's almost by definition an addiction. Even when you know something's harming you, you won't change your behavior, and that's a sign that you're addicted.
Thanks for sharing that. Somebody is asking, are the times that we live in now and the lack of God in people and a permissive society, are they a factor for the increasing of the pandemic of addiction?
Absolutely. Again, God made the human heart so big only he can fill it. And so if you are, if you don't have a relationship with God and you don't have the peace that comes with God, Jesus says to take my yoke upon me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. If you don't have that abiding thing, that when you're in trouble, you can go to your knees and agonize with God, like Hezekiah did. When the king of the Assyrians encircled Jerusalem, and it looked like they were going to lose, and Hezekiah spread out the letters from this letter from the king in front of him, called on the name of God, and God sent one angel, and the one angel slew 185,000 of the Assyrian army. There's a peace that comes from knowing God has your back. And so when you take a society and you remove God from it, people hurt and they pain, they find something else to medicate themselves with, something else to try and soothe the pain with. And this is, I believe, one of the big reasons for many addictions, besides the fact that you also create a more traumatic society if God is not in the society. People are willing to hurt children. Women are more abused. People are more cutthroat. And the trauma and the pain of life can set you up later on, if it's not dealt with, to want to self-medicate that. And so I think they're absolutely right. I think our society has created fertile ground for addiction, on the one hand by creating a traumatic world and a godless world, but on the other hand by making drugs and alcohol ubiquitous and even marketing and advertising them all the way down to children sometimes. Even though that's supposed to be illegal, children see much of these advertisements. So we've created a fertile ground for it, and it may get worse all the way up until when Christ comes.
This is a question that I need to read slowly to make sure I'm asking it right. If addictions generate new neurological circuits associated with the pleasure caused by chemical stimulation, how does the rehabilitation process work? Is it possible to eliminate those circuits and create new ones, or is it just through neural plasticity?
Actually, this is a great question. Normally, when I do this talk, I have a whole section I do on I have a whole section that I do um, on habits and how habits are formed, and what the neurologists and neuroscientists tell you is that when these acetylcholine based pathways are formed in the brain, they're permanent. And so Ellen White says that these are grooves that are formed in the brain. But what's interesting is that the science also says that the solution to this is to create new, deeper grooves in the brain. This is why you become a new creation, because as you change your habits, new grooves are created in the mind, and you are able to overcome the old habits. And it isn't until, I believe, we're glorified, in my opinion, when Christ comes and in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, we're all changed, that a lot of that is all just erased, and we don't have to struggle with those things anymore. But you can make new networks that are more powerful than the old networks in order to change behavior.
That's really interesting. And I guess, maybe we can follow up with another talk in the near future where we can, get a little bit deeper into those topics, so that some of us that are wanting to get this extra information can get, I guess, the possibility to be able to ask you and pick your brain a little bit more with regards to that. This is a good question here. It says, can you speak more to food addiction? I feel like food is almost more an acceptable addiction, so it's not spoken of like drugs or alcohol. I could relate to the stages of addiction regarding mood swings, but with chocolate, for example. What can you do to avoid reaching to things like chocolate to feel better or soothe a bad mood?
Wow, that's a whole sermon in itself, the answer to this one. But the person writing this question is 100% right. The truth of the matter is we don't look at food the same way, but it can be just as destructive. Solomon says, if you be a man given to appetite, that you should put a knife to your throat. So it's one of the challenging things that we face. And again, the food is designed now. That chocolate you're eating is designed to be addicting. All of these things play into this. And so food addiction is real. I mean, that's why we have an obesity epidemic in the United States. And I know that there's one in Australia as well. So this is a real thing, and it's really it's more acceptable because you're not intoxicated and so forth. But the Bible of Solomon also says, blessed are ye when your princes eat for strength and not for drunkenness. And I believe this is one of the texts that Daniel and the three Hebrew boys used in Daniel 1 when they made up their minds that they weren't going to eat of the king's meat or drink of his wine. So you're absolutely right. There's a lot to talk about here. And in a nutshell, our health message helps to break food addiction. If you're eating whole foods, not processed junk foods, whole foods, plant-based, removing animal products from the diet, if you're drinking plenty of water, getting your exercise to release endorphins, which help you to give you a feeling of satiety and so forth, and making sure to space your meals to give you a chance in between meals for the food to digest, you can begin to break this. But it's not easy because you have to eat. And so if you have to eat, you're always going to face the temptation of eating something that can be addicting, like chocolate. So again, it'd be a lot more to say it, but I would say that the health message, a whole food plant-based diet in much of the world, even outside of Adventism and Christianity, much of the world now is realizing how much better it is to have a plant-based diet.
And I think that's a perfect way to finish off, because we have one more question left that I think ties into what you were just talking about there. Somebody is asking, are protein powders, and by protein powders would be those that are filled with a casein, protein powders that you take after you go to the gym, whey powders, are they good for the body? And is it a good source of dieting, or is it harmful for the temple or the body? So maybe talk a little bit about casein and what that is and how it affects us, and and where it's found?
So most of the protein powders you get are made from whey protein, which comes from cow milk, and it does have probably some casein in a lot of them. Casein, we know, is a cancer-promoting protein. So it is the protein, casein is the protein that makes a calf turn into a cow very quickly. The growth rate is so rapid. So when you take large amounts of casein, and that is in cow milk-based cheeses, butter, yogurts, milk, any of those things, and especially it's worse in like ice cream and cheese because it's very concentrated. The casein actually goes into our body and it promotes. So it promotes growth. So if you have a mutated cell and you feed it casein, you're more likely to wind up with cancer. That's really what, if you watch the documentary Forks Over Knives, which is based on the book, The China Study, that's what they talk about. So protein, most Americans, and I would assume it's the same for Australia, most Americans and most Westerners in general eat far more protein than the body needs and actually damage the kidneys. So then people say, what about plant proteins? So if it's like soy and you concentrate it and you isolate the soy protein, it can also damage the body because you don't want that much protein. Protein is best consumed actually in green leafy vegetables. When you look at the biggest, strongest animals in the world, whether it's the blue whale or the elephant, some of the great apes, they all eat nothing but 100% plants, and yet they're big and strong because 100 calories of broccoli has more protein than 100 calories of steak. There's a lot of broccoli in 100 calories of broccoli. I'm not one that promotes like protein powders or pre-workout drinks and post-workout drinks. So a lot of it has a lot of chemicals and stuff in it that we still don't even know how it might affect the human body.
All right, awesome. I think we'll leave it there. And again, we're very, very thankful for the time that you've taken to be with us today and to give us as well the opportunity to ask you some questions and just get some information from you based on the things that you have studied and researched over the years. And we're hoping that in the near future sometime we can have you back again and we'll be able to continue to have some further discussions on some of the topics that we have being able to talk about today and maybe just kind of skim the surface on some and hopefully, be able to get a bit deeper into some of them in the future. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All righty. Everyone have a good day there in Australia. I love
Thank
Australia.
you. Thank you so much.
All right.
What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a blessedness.